Support for WUWM podcasts comes from University School of Milwaukee, fulfilling a values-based mission of developing learners, fostering leaders, and preparing citizens for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. More information at usm.org/mission.
Lake Effect brings you conversations about what's happening in Milwaukee and the people, places, and organizations that shape our community. This is Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.
Despite community pushback, the Milwaukee Police Department has been considering expanding its use of facial recognition technology. Milwaukee's Equal Rights Commission and the majority of Milwaukee's Common Council have come out in opposition to expanding the use of facial recognition, citing concerns over misidentification. Others, like Emilio De Torre from the Milwaukee Turners, have voiced concerns over how data collected from facial recognition technology could be weaponized against the community, especially as the Trump administration continues its crusade against undocumented people. De Torre is also a member of WUWM's advisory board. He recently wrote an op-ed for the Shepherd Express, arguing that facial recognition data is bound to end up in the hands of federal authorities. He joins me now to talk about this issue. Emilio, thank you so much for joining us here on Lake Effect.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here.
When we're talking about facial recognition technology, I think it might surprise people to learn that this is something the Milwaukee Police Department is just talking about now, but this is also something they've already been engaging with in some ways. What are the kinds of information gathering that they're currently doing in this field?
Sure. That's a great question. And I think the exposure that the Milwaukee Police Department has been using facial recognition technology has kind of leaked out into the public the way the exposure of their use of other technologies has leaked out to the public. We don't know. We're not quite certain how long they've been using it because they haven't really told the public, regardless of folks at the Equal Rights Commission or the Fire and Police Commission or the Common Council asking for this information or them pledging transparency and saying that they valued public input. They really haven't been forthcoming. We just know that they've been using facial recognition technology of one sort or another for at least a couple of years. Where that goes, who has access to it, what type of biometric data they're collecting from our faces now, or what they're hoping to collect in the future, or where they're going to trade it or sell it. It's all a big gray mystery. And I think that kind of erodes the trust of Milwaukeeans. Joy, this happened a few years ago when Flynn was still chief, when they had used the stingrays and it was the BBC. It was an international embarrassment for Milwaukee that when the BBC broke this case that the police department were tracking our cell phones, so potentially our phone calls, all of our text messages, and that could create a little dragnet of a mile and a mile and a half radius. There's an awful lot of people in Milwaukee in a mile radius, and that they had used that 500 times before they were honest about it. And for them to then do this with facial recognition technology and to smugly, in a Fire and Police Commission presentation, say that they were offering to trade 2.5 million faces of Milwaukeeans to this company to use in their algorithms to, making a map library of our faces. That's a terrible thing.
Yeah. Now it seems like there is some public discussion of the kinds of facial recognition technologies they're hoping to use, are currently using. What have we been hearing from them about what they hope to do and what they're planning to do, I guess?
Sure. And some of that's a little opaque. If you recall, the Common Council, at least 11 of the 15 Common Council members had written a letter to Chief Norman saying, please don't use this technology. It's insidious. It's powerful. It's unclear how you're going to use this. There's been nothing forthcoming from the police department about how you have been using this without telling us for a couple of years, let alone how you project using this. It had come to light that they were hoping to have a contract with a company called Biometrica. And, you find a lot with these end user license agreements that the Milwaukee Police Department and other police departments get involved with, that these private companies now have access to data that is gleaned from us, Milwaukee residents, paid for with our tax dollars, and then commodified and sold to international weapons companies, private data machines, companies that have demonstrably used faulty racist algorithms which misidentify Black and Asian and non-binary folks on the regular. And now our police departments, in opposition to the public expressions we saw at multiple public meetings, in opposition to the desires of the Common Council, still want to go forward and use this. I'm not sure how they will use it in the future because they haven't really told us how they've used it for the past couple of years. And so I don't want to have conjecture based on something that I feel has been intentionally hidden from us. What I do know is that because of the fusion centers and because of the recent erosion between the federal government and our local law enforcement, that any data from anything, the flock cameras, automated license plate readers, red light cameras, facial recognition technology, anything that is recorded and aggregated by a police department will be accessed by ICE and the federal government and used against folks in the way that we currently see ICE moving against folks now. And I think that that is an abomination.
Yeah, you wrote an article about this, and one of the things you point to as being the real argument against collecting this data, but more so the idea that we could somehow keep this data away from the federal government, from ICE, from CBP, is the track record, what's been happening right now. You mentioned the Wisconsin fusion centers. Can you tell us about these?
Sure. So not too far from here, right? Near Marquette and MATC is a big building, and it houses something called STAC. And STAC is the Southeast Wisconsin Fusion Center. That is a building where federal and state and local and county, local meaning city and county law enforcement, have an aggregated network of all sorts of information, intel, technology, and resources. Normally, there are laws and due process that folks follow to share information. If I want to do a wiretap on Joy Powers, I have to show to a judge why I need this thing. The judge has to review that and say, okay, yes, this seems plausible. Go forward and get this. And so there are firewalls. The Milwaukee Police Department has its own fusion center in the same building. What we've seen of late is that there are multiple ways for law enforcement to get around the safeties and the protections that we as citizens and we as residents in this country and the city should enjoy. One of them is kind of like the do me a favor, fellow law enforcement guy network. And what happened recently in San Francisco, showing how officers in Georgia, in Michigan, in all of these other states were able to access the San Francisco Police Department's flock cameras 1,600,000 times by other states' police departments. So that's like, hey, fellow officer, can you do me a favor and run this? And it turns out that a lot of those 1,600,000 times that local police department's flock cameras were accessed were done on behalf of ICE. So now other states can, through this informal channel, be able to access the things that the Milwaukee Police Department or STAC, the Southeast Wisconsin Fusion Center, may have, regardless of what they say. The other way is how ICE is already demonstrably accessing these things. You know, with the changes in how states are moving, for example, an insidious example that occurred in Texas where they used some 80,000 cameras to track a woman's movements because they believed she was going to leave the state for an abortion. If that doesn't terrify people that they can track you this way, then perhaps another article out of just this week's newspapers. I was reading this morning how the Greenfield Chief of Police, Jay Johnson, was using his own police department's surveillance cameras to spy on his soon-to-be ex-wife because he had concerns over who she was dating. That is the chief of police of the Greenfield Police Department. This is what's being alleged, and the mayor and council people and other officers advised him against this. we're putting incredibly powerful technology which can follow folks anywhere, makes maps of you, and synthesize it in one room now in these fusion centers. At the fusion centers, there's things called Fusus and other technologies, some owned by the government, some third-party softwares, which are currently monitoring all of your social media, your Facebook, your TikTok, your Instagram, YouTube, your streaming platforms. This broadcast now, once it gets uploaded, are being examined for vocabulary, for photos, analyzing different things. This isn't an episode of Black Mirror. This is real, and all of your listeners can look these things up, and hopefully this will inspire them to look that up, because this is all aggregated in these fusion centers, and the one closest to us, just a mile away from us, and it allows folks to access this very quickly. And whether they're accessing it because the federal government can just say that they can access it and push through, whether they're accessing it because they're looking at it as some sort of collegial favor to a fellow officer, or whether they're accessing it because it's a bad actor using these powerful resources for their own nefarious reasons, doesn't really matter. The fact is that since these tools exist, it is possible for them to be exploited by all of these folks. And I believe very much that this is a nonpartisan issue. I believe that Democrats and Republicans should care deeply that we are giving away so much of our privacy to organizations that are not only no longer seem to be within the confines of the law, but are also intentionally masking and hiding themselves. So even when they are in public, we cannot identify who they are. And to give an organization that has seemingly no accountability all of this power is a gross mistake.
I was talking to someone recently about writing, specifically his concerns about previous things he's written and how it might be perceived by the federal government today. And it seems like one of the big concerns here, especially with the aggregation of all of this kind of information on people, is that you might not be doing anything in particular, but if you're looking for red flags, you can create red flags. Is there any feasible way to safeguard this information once it is collected?
I don't see that any longer. It's like the nuclear detente, and that's a loser's game. I see our only path forward as Milwaukeeans is to, like many other cities before us, San Francisco, both Portlands, Madison, prevent the use of this weaponized technology in our city. We do not need this. It has not been shown to deter crime. They will find one example and bandy it about and say, hey, look, it helped us find this person half an hour sooner or an hour sooner. That's not a good enough reason, because the harm greatly outweighs any perceived, any conjectured benefit, and I haven't seen that benefit demonstrably proven. I think to create this tool and to think that the federal government can't and won't touch it is absurdly naive. I might say that having a handgun is a good safety precaution for my home, and it may be. But to leave that handgun on a desk with people I don't trust, where a child or someone else can access it, is foolish. And I'm using that analogy for facial recognition technology. I do not believe the city should use this. There are many other alternatives that will encourage safety and promote safety and promote equity. It is demonstrably racist and flawed in how the algorithms work. That is proven. And for us to now create these databases and maps of Milwaukee residents, which will be a low-hanging fruit and plucked off by the federal government, no matter what the police say, is foolishness on our part as a city.
One of the biggest concerns that I think you mentioned is, yes, about our community, but also about community trust. We want our communities to have good relationships with the police. It's good when people trust one another, so when something bad is happening, they feel as though there's someone to help them.
Absolutely.
What is the impact this is having and could have on community trust?
That's really poignant, because I think when our community was first shaken by the prospect of immigration raids, ripping Milwaukee families apart, and unchecked, not strategic federal encroachments into our communities, our city was good in saying that we were supporting Milwaukeeans. If I feel as an immigrant that I can't come to the police to report a crime I've seen, or say I know who stole my neighbor's car, or smile and wave and be an active, productive member of my community, then our city's resilience is diminished. And the chief of police and the sheriff did a good job early on saying that they were here for the residents of Milwaukee. To use all of a sudden a tool like facial recognition technology, which ICE will access. Even now that people know that ICE is accessing the license plate readers and flock cameras, has sent an incredible chilling message into the community. To your point of trust, you look at it as a bank, and every time an action removes a coin of trust from that piggy bank, the police or the sheriff's department has to put it back. They came out strong when this crisis first hit, and Milwaukee residents were grateful to them for it. When everybody discovered that ICE could access license plate readers and flock cameras no matter what, that trust diminished. And you see it happening in other cities, and whether or not it's been publicized as having happened here yet doesn't matter, because nobody's naive enough to believe that only Milwaukee is magically protected. To add this new technology of facial recognition algorithms and surveillance into what we already have is going to really, really erode trust between immigrant population and folks who are already demonstrably on the short end of the stick of FRT, like Black and Asian folks.
Yeah. Well, Emilio, thank you so much for joining us here on Lake Effect and sharing your work.
Thank you, too. Appreciate it.
Emilio De Torre is the executive director of the Milwaukee Turners and a member of WUWM's advisory board. We reached out to the Milwaukee Police Department for comment, but did not hear back by our deadline.
You can find more interviews like this one by visiting WUWM.com/Lake Effect. And while you're there, subscribe to the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast.
Sources and methods, the crown jewels of the intelligence community. Shorthand for how do we know what's real? Who told us? If you have those answers, you're on the inside, and NPR wants to bring you there. From the Pentagon to the State Department to spy agencies, listen to understand what's really happening and what it means for you. Sources and Methods, the new national security podcast from NPR.